Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much again for joining us this month. This month is episode 2 in our Mastering Eloqua, the Basics 101. So today is all about the email design editor. So hopefully we'll be able to share a few tips and tricks with you that you may or may not be aware of. And of course, questions are always encouraged. So please go ahead and ask your questions as we move through. And on that note, let's have a look at some housekeeping. As you know, we record these sessions via Zoom, and replays are available through our website, so you can access them from our blog at marketingcube.com.au. So please feel free to jump in there and have a look at some of the past episodes of the user group. Also, we welcome questions throughout. So again, you've got the Q&A function from Zoom to ask those. Just be aware that they are public, so people can upvote them. If your question is particularly of interest to others, they don't have to retype it, they can just upvote yours. And so we'll see that here. If you do want to ask us a question without everybody knowing, that's fine too. And please feel free to use the chat function to submit a private question, and we'll keep an eye on those as we move through the webinar. My name is Derek Bell. I'm your host today. I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing here at Marketing Cube, and greetings from Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, there's that QR code for November if you wanted to go ahead and register using your smartphone, but of course you will also receive an invitation. So we look forward to seeing you. So let's have a quick look at the agenda for today's session. There were a few questions submitted specifically from our Australian clients this month that I thought might be of interest to the broader user community. So we'll leave those in and I'll touch on those quickly, but then we'll dive into the email design editor itself and actually get into the platform. So we'll move away from the slides and actually get into the platform itself and show you that. We'll also look at some ways of achieving greater personalization using field merges and dynamic content within the context of your emails, and also look at previewing and testing your emails, often an important part of the process. And if we have some time, getting to the Eloqua Insight and dashboards as well. In relation to release 20D, the US team from the Eloqua product marketing team are actually doing the announcements. I think it's this Friday around 2 a.m. my time, so I'll be in better sleep at that point. But as soon as we get some more information from that, we'll be able to share that with you. So there's not really much to share with you this month because we're just a couple of days away from knowing all about that. So, but we'll certainly have updates for you in November as we catch up for our final user group for 2022. So let's dive in. Have a quick look at some of these questions. One question came from a client of ours, Steve, in Melbourne, Australia. He describes it as an oddball question in relation to emojis and just having some challenges with different emojis not working, some do, some don't, and trying to understand what that might be. So Steve had indicated he thought it might have to do with Unicode versions. And after speaking with our developers, I discovered that's exactly what it is. So Eloqua supports what's known as UTF-8 emoji character sets, and that covers most emojis, but not all. And so that may be part of the issue that Steve was experiencing. There is a link there for Wikipedia. If you just probably go to Wikipedia and search for miscellaneous symbols, I'm sure it'll pop up, or you could just repeat that URL that you can see right in front of you. But that will show you those that are available and that would work with Eloqua. And if you're wondering what that whole Unicode UTF-8 scenario was, from the email editor, if you access the settings area and then down to advanced settings, there it is right there. You can see the UTF-8. Now that pretty much is the default. So unless there's been any changes by your Eloqua administrators to altering the default, then it should be as you can see on the screen right now. So as long as that's the case, you should have no problems with the use of emojis. So thank you, Steve, for that question. Another interesting question came from Nick, a client in Melbourne. Nick is from a higher education background, and his question. So when we ran the session for the Australian group, my response to him was that I wondered if really that question is the right question. So how high of a reliance should you have on dynamic content being part of your emails? And even go so far as to ask what's the best practice percentage of an email being made up of dynamic content. And I suggested to him that that's probably not the right question. Okay, so the right question is, If my goal is to personalize my communications better, how can dynamic content help me? But dynamic content is driven by the quality of your data at the end of the day. So if you don't have the underlying data, that becomes a challenge. So I think it's really hard to try and assign a percentage for, excuse me, how much of the email should contain dynamic content, kind of coming out of the wrong way. But certainly, with the right underlying content, you're in a good position. Right underlying data, you're in a good position to use dynamic content. Another question from Kath in Sydney. Excuse me. So Kath was asking about exporting Eloqua emails for use in Outlook. Again, the answer here, I think, is that maybe something like Engage is a better solution. And she also asked about inserting video files. So in relation to video files, you can store video files in Eloqua, but your maximum file size is 10 megabytes. Now, depending on the size of your video, obviously that could be a little bit limiting, unless you've got some good video compression technology to get that file size down. So typically, she did also ask the question about the app within Eloqua only going to YouTube. In fact, it goes to YouTube or Vimeo. So you can put a Vimeo URL or a YouTube URL into Eloqua, and that will function and work as you would expect. And what it does, it pulls in usually the featured image from your YouTube or Vimeo image. Now, the challenge is, unless that featured image has a play button built into the JPEG that you've uploaded to either of those video sharing platforms, then what you end up with is a video, what looks like just a still image in Eloqua. It's not overly intuitive that it's actually a video that somebody could click on. So what we find most people do is they don't really use that function within Eloqua. They'll simply put in a JPEG, which is a still image from the video, which includes a play button in the center. And a couple of options there. You can either push people off to YouTube. Now, if you have a YouTube channel that is rich in content, that's possibly a good thing. If it's a little bit light on, before you know it, people are watching cat videos and you've lost them. Okay, so I think a better solution is to use that same video function, but now putting it onto an Eloqua landing page. So, and then you can present it as video and etc. You can still put actually, no, you can't put an image in front of it, but you can obviously present it as a video, and in a browser, it will present differently, and it becomes a little bit more intuitive that it is in fact a video for people to watch. I'm trying to think, do we ever send people to YouTube? I don't think we do really for anything. We either have videos embedded on our website or we embed videos directly onto an Eloqua landing page. And the upside to that whole experience is with your video sitting on an Eloqua landing page, you're much more in control of the experience. So you can still provide them with other things to watch. You can choose and pick and curate different videos to have below the primary video that you've got on your landing page. Plus you can personalize it. So you can group people by name, etc., provide them with links to other resources, etc., and you're not losing them to cat videos on and maybe cat videos is a bit old now, but still, you get my point. You're not going to lose them necessarily on YouTube. So something to play around with there. The other suggestion I thought was, though, to also potentially look at using GIFs. GIFs are a really great way to grab people's attention, and instead of a static image, that you'll actually get a bit of movement, which is great. So use of GIFs can be quite helpful. Very easy to upload. It's just uploading a file into Eloqua, no different, and then dropping your GIF into the email. So something for you to think about there. All right, let's jump directly into the email design editor overview and have a closer look at what it has to offer. So if we look at the design editor, and pretty much everything we talk about at this point is also really pretty much the same from an Eloqua landing page point of view. So to start with, it's all about the design components, and this is where you're going to select your text and your buttons and your URLs, etc., that you want to add, and dynamic content and shared content. All those sorts of things are basically the design components that you drop into your email. The layout is exactly that. It's basically sort of frames that you drop onto the email, and you can adjust column widths and have full width or multiple columns, etc., and you can play around with those, and you can adjust them as you need them. Okay. Then we have blocks. So blocks is another really important part of the platform because blocks enable you to produce content that you're going to use again and again. Now, think of it from a branding point of view. From a branding point of view, as you know today, if you're in Eloqua and you drag a button into the platform, it's the standard Eloqua blue button, and I think it's set to 12-point text. Okay. Probably not on brand for you. And so every time you drag in that blue button, you then have to change it to your color. You then need to put the slightly rounded edges on it if that's what you do. You might increase the font size. So there's all these additional steps that you need to do. What you can do is create an on-brand button as a block and then just drag the block in and it's done. And so all the user needs to do at that point is add a URL to it and change the copy. And they're done. So it's a much faster process. It also means consistency. So you're not going to have, if your buttons are red, for example, you're not going to have 25 different shades of red because no one can ever quite remember the hex code or the RGB. Okay, so blocks is a great way to enhance the range of design components that you can drop into your layout throughout the email. We'll show you some examples of where we use blocks as well. Actually, some of the emails you get from us will contain different various pieces of blocks that we've created over time. The other important part of your email editor is the style menu. So this is where we play around with colors, as in sort of the canvas and the background area of your email, along obviously with font colors, the width of your email. So is it a 600 or 756 or 1080, which is quite a large email? The canvas alignment, so left, centered, or right, default is the center, and that's how most of you probably send your emails. However, if you wanted to craft those, I like to call them those sneaky emails that kind of are meant to look like they've come out of Outlook, but in reality, they've come out of a marketing automation platform. And so that's why we would use the canvas alignment to move everything to the left. So it looks like when it arrives in a person's inbox, it's sitting to the left and looks a little bit more like it's come from Outlook or Gmail or something. So that's your canvas alignment. There are defaults you can set for font and color, also default hyperlink color as well, and also additional CSS should you want to use that. Then under email settings, this is where you will select your email group, which you can't send an email in Eloqua unless you have an email group assigned. Subject line, preview text, sender name, and also the advanced settings area within the platform. So let's dive in and have a closer look at all those various bits and pieces. All right, welcome to Eloqua. So we start at our home screen, we move to the asset menu, and from the asset menu, we select emails. And then once we're here, there'll be a few ways that you might go about doing things. What we're going to focus on is the design editor for today. So we click on create an email. And the first thing you'll notice is it defaults to what's called new and recent. So this is things that I've recently been looking at. And then sitting at the top here are all these templates from Eloqua. So I'm just going to zoom my screen in a little bit for you, so hopefully that's a bit easier to see. Yeah, so these are all the defaults provided by Eloqua. I think largely nobody really uses them unless it's like the first 24 hours that you've logged into Eloqua for the first time, because of what you're obviously after is on-brand templates, and that's where you will spend probably, hopefully, most of your time. But for today, what I'm going to do is just focus on one of these standard templates, because we want to focus on the functional areas of Eloqua. First thing it's going to prompt you to do is to add a subject line and also an email group and provide preview text. Now, you'll notice that none of these are actually required. You might notice that you come in here and you can probably just go ahead and click on design email and it'll take you straight into the editor. The reason that information is there and why it's prompting you to add them is that you can't send yourself a test email until you've added a subject line and also assigned the email group and obviously saved your email. So that's why they're there, to prompt you essentially to make that addition. All right, so let's have a look. So here are those different menus that we talked about just in a moment ago. We talked about the design components and the layout areas over on the left. We then looked at blocks, explaining what blocks do. And so here are some of the blocks that we use at Marketing Cube. You can see some of them are very simple, sort of 2-column with buttons or a image on the left and copy on the right type scenario. And there's more of those. We'll show you those later. Then email styles. So what we're doing here is we're controlling the look and feel of both the background area, but also the canvas area. And then finally, the settings area where the email group and subject line are added. All right, let's go back to the beginning. So design components. So I've selected a template which actually has a few bits and pieces already added in there, but I've got complete control over what I want to do. So perhaps the first thing I want to do is add a little bit more space. So maybe I drop in some more layout components. Now you'll notice when you do that, see that horizontal line that's appearing across the screen there? It's going above and below the click to add text. That's going to tell you where the layout piece is that you're going to drop in, or the cell, the empty cell. So once you've got the empty cell in place, then you're up to, okay, what do I want to do now? I probably want to add some text, for example. So when you're adding text to Eloqua, if you spent time in sort of CMS platforms, often I'm on a Mac. So for me, it's using something like Text Edit. If you're on a PC, it'll probably be a little tool like Notepad. The beauty of those two little documents is the text file capability, which enables you to strip away, like if you go from a Word document and copying from Word directly into a marketing automation platform, your website, etc., those sorts of things, it can often bring unnecessary code with you, which can slow things down or not have things perform in an optimum way. So I generally come through something like a text edit or Notepad. So I can drop it in like so, and there it is on my page. Now, once I've got it in there, if I double click, it'll highlight the whole lot. And then I've got the ability to control adjusting size and so on and so forth, and spacing. So whether it be single, I tend to fluctuate between 1.5 spacing for copy. However, if I want to play around with headings, I often change those to 1.15. Now, this duplicate function becomes incredibly handy. Okay, so if, for instance, we decide, let me just delete one of those for a moment. If we decide we want to do a little bit of formatting, and this will, I'm sure, be the case with most of you, you might decide, well, I want to do 20 pixel padding on either side. My general rule of thumb there too, by the way, is whatever we do on the left, we should do on the right. So if we're 20 pixels on the left, we want to be 20 pixels on the right. The main reason for that is that when we go to mobile, we want it to be consistent in the way that it looks, as you can see. So I can do that. So instead of then coming down here and having to repeat the process, or potentially going back to my scratch pad there and dropping in more text and having to then change it and make it 16 point and add my padding, if you've already done the formatting, go ahead and duplicate it. Okay, a much easier way of doing things. It's much faster, and certainly one of the benefits of working from a template versus starting from scratch like I'm doing here. All right, so we've added a little bit of layout. So you can see there's two content pieces like so, with sort of the purpley colored shading around it, versus the layout area. So what that enables me to do is to move things around. I can grab that whole layout section and move it around like so, or I can take a piece of content out of the layout and drop it into another cell. And you'll notice now that I've actually got two separate pieces of layout. So I had a question from a client a little while ago. She was putting together an email. Actually, it was a landing page, but the principle remains pretty much the same. And so what she had done, she had a piece in the middle like so, and then she had her list, which here's one I prepared earlier. So I can, let me just duplicate that, and I'll drop that in. So to help me maintain the styling, especially when I'm pasting, it's still, despite the fact that you can't see the HTML, there's obviously still HTML happening in the background there. And if you spend any time in WordPress or CMS platforms, etc., you'll know that if I, generally speaking, and it doesn't always do this, but if I was to paste, yeah, it did there. So what I've done there, it's lost the styling and the formatting. So it's gone from 16 point down. So I'm going to use the undo there for a second. Get rid of that. So if I highlight one letter in, so after the L and before the full stop, if I now do paste, notice now I've maintained the styling. So I'm just going to get rid of that first letter, probably get rid of my full stop. So that's just one nice little trick. Again, as I said, if you've spent some time in WordPress and others, you'll get that little trick. Okay, so what she wanted to do was she thought this just was too big. There was just too much space happening here on the right-hand side. So she wanted to do two columns and she was kind of stuck. And I said, oh, easy, easy, we can do that. So what we do is first thing we want to do is add a different column. Now, at the moment, you can see we've actually got this is all sitting in one layout. So I can adjust over here. But the thing is, I don't want the paragraph of copy at the top to also be in two columns. That's not how I want it to be. Okay, so if that's the case, what we need to do is come back to our layout area and drag in a new two-column layout section. Then what I'm going to do is take my text, drop it down like so. And one thing you can't control with the bullet points in this example is the spacing from sort of this area here on the left of the bullet point. The only degree of control you've really got is to play around with the padding. Now, this is going to be counter to what I just suggested. I just suggested to you that whenever you do padding, always have the same on the left and the same on the right. With bullets, you can kind of get away with cheating, and that's how you're able to maybe get a little bit more control over how indented those bullet points are. Okay, so really it's just padding. All right, so if I then duplicate that, again, I just trying to save time and improve consistency. Now I've got my two columns. Now, it's really important to always check. I think I do this all the time. As I'm building an email, I'll jump between full view and mobile view. And that's that little button you can see here at the top. Now, you'll notice when you do that, I've now got this sort of artificial and strange gap in between my lists, which when I'm in full view is completely okay, not drama. But I think you'll agree it looks a bit odd from a mobile point of view. So how do you fix that? Really quite easy. What you want to do is play around with your padding and actually reduce it all the way to 0 in both columns, as in top and bottom, not left and right, just top and bottom. So if I now go to mobile view, now you can see that it in fact just looks like one long list of bullet points without an odd gap in the middle. If you wanted to work a little bit more spacing into that, what you could do is use the spacer option and drop it in the layout section above. Probably a little bit too much, so I can reduce that maybe down to 10 pixels. Yeah, that looks better. And then I can just duplicate that again, grab the toggle, and then bring it down and sort of repeat the process here. So again, I can jump in here and have a look. Yeah, that looks fine. Happy with that. So that's one way to work with columns, and that one can kind of stump people sometimes, like, how can I get that to do what I want it to do? So hopefully that is one helpful way for you to do that. Let's jump over and have a look at styling, and we'll come back to blocks. So styling enables you to control the colors and all that kind of fun stuff that's happening, and also the width of your email. 600 is the standard, and has probably been the standard since emails first really started happening. We at Marketing Cube have elected to use 756 as our standard default on all of our emails. One of the primary reasons for that is that we know through looking at Eloqua and through Google Analytics that the absolute vast majority of people that access our content are people like you who are probably right now sitting at a desktop location, maybe with a laptop, an external monitor, and it's highly likely that you've got an external monitor that's probably at least 1920 by 1080 pixels. Okay, so just one question here from Devon. Hi, Devon. Do certain email providers, Apple, Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo, etc., not recognize the mobile function of Eloqua? I've tested opening one of my emails in the email app on my iPhone, and it pulls up the desktop version. That's very strange. I have iPhone as well, and I'm always testing emails on my iPhone, and I don't seem to have a problem with that. I've not noticed that particular issue. Probably worthwhile having, are all of your emails, Devon, built in the design editor, or are they built in the source editor with HTML? If you could just throw that into the Q&A or the chat, whichever, just to confirm. Built in the design editor, okay, which is what we're using here right now. Probably would need to have a look at your emails. Is there any additional code that you're adding, any CSS or anything? Because it sounds like something is potentially breaking the code that tells the email clients to render your email in the mobile view. But probably a bit hard to troubleshoot that one here, but certainly not a problem that I've had. It could be worthwhile something submitting into Oracle to have a look at. Or as we've talked at before, we could have a go at helping with that one, or Litmus. Have you tried using a Litmus service? I don't know if you have a paid service with Tess. There we go. Yeah, Quid is suggesting. Thank you. Tessa with Litmus is certainly a good idea. All right, so let's have a quick look here at some of the colors. Now I'm going to add some colors here that are really revolting, just to give you a really clear indication of what I mean. So we talk about background color. So this is the background color. So if you think about when an email arrives in your inbox, as I was saying to you there before, why we chose the 756, largely it's because what we saw people doing is they'd have Outlook open or Gmail open, for instance, that have their sort of inbox over on the left and then the preview section on the right. And then there'd be this skinny little 600 pixel wide email with all of this sort of yellow real estate sitting around it. Like, well, let's use that real estate a bit more effectively. So yeah, so we decided to run with 756 as our default on all of our emails that we send using Eloqua. And the reason that's also a very comfortable decision is because of the ability or the fact that those emails are rendered responsively out of the box without the need for any additional code, which is an upside. Okay, so that's the background. Now the canvas color you can also control. And again, I'm just going to choose a really contrasting color to make that clear. Now, once you change the canvas color, you do have the ability to then add color in a range of different ways. So to layout, I can change the color here like so. And then within the actual content itself, again, I can manipulate the background color and change it like so. So you can see that you've kind of got these various layers that you can play. Now, of course, hopefully, I think you'd agree, what's on screen right now is quite revolting, but just trying to illustrate the differences there for you from a visual point of view. Now, another really neat function that I love that is out of the box and doesn't require any code is the function to hide on mobile and hide on desktop. So I'm just going to randomly select a banner. Let's choose a reminder. This might even be for next month. Yes, it is. This is the reminder image for next month. It's already set up. So that looks fantastic on desktop view, but I may decide that for mobile, actually, yeah, I'm not sure. I want to get rid of that. So what I can do is simply click on the image, and you can do this with the text box as well. Doesn't matter. You can do it with either. And then over here on the left-hand side is the hide in mobile section. So now if I click on that and select mobile, you'll now see that it's gone. Let's play around going back the other way. So if I decide this particular body of text is something that I don't want to have appear in desktop view, you'll see now is the hide in desktop view. So now when we go back to the full view, you'll see it's gone. Okay, there's that little section there that I had in blue, but that's different. So that gives you the ability to, especially if you're thinking of like staggering images, sort of, if you want to do a split down the middle with an image on the right and copy on the left, and then an image on the left and copy on the right, etc. That looks lovely on full view. But then when you go to mobile, without any changes, it typically renders as copy, image, image, copy, image, image, copy, which doesn't make any sense. So you can use the hide in mobile, hide on desktop to have that render as you need it in the different scenarios. So a great little built-in feature, which is very cool. Now, if you're playing around from a personalization point of view, and actually, let me just do blocks first before we go on. So the blocks area is here on the left, and you create blocks from within the email itself. So it may be that this section right here that I really like with the blue background is something that I want to use again and again. So you'll notice the block icon, which appears like so. So what happens there is I'll just call it sample for now. So I can click on save, and I'll get a new editor open. Let me get rid of that. So we type sample over here, and there it is. And so I can select edit from that menu. It wants me to save the email first, sorry. Let me do that. And here we go, edit. All right. So now you're in the block editor. Now you do have, your administrator does have the ability to control who can create blocks. So if you don't see that little icon, it just means you don't have access to create them. Being able to access them to use in your emails is a different capability. So you can give it a name, you can give it a little bit of a description, and you can also control where the block is available. Is it available just as for emails, or just for landing pages, or is it available in both? So you've got that ability to play around with it. Now you can either set it up, and when you come in here, the maximum layout areas that you can add is 3. So you'll see I've got 1, 2, actually that's 1, yeah, that's 2, that's 3. Whereas you'll see all the layout options here are now grayed out. I can't bring any more in. So the maximum number of pieces of layout you can have is 3, which I've not found limiting in any way. It's certainly enough for what I need to do. But you can see you've got the ability to still use things like dynamic content, video, adding signatures, custom code, buttons, images, all of the rest that you can add in there as well. So the nice part there is that when people then access your range of blocks that you've created, which let me give you an example. So one that we use a lot is for people to access replays of the user group. So I have these set up, so I just bring them in, and you may well have even seen some of these in some of the communications that you get from us. And so I drop them in like so. And so they're all done. They're ready. It takes seconds to drop in. It's certainly a time saver. So if you think about reusable content, or if there are things that you find that you are creating again and again and again, then potentially creating them as a block is a huge time saver. Now, it's not just using them for content like I've done there. We also have other areas where we found that we were sort of recreating things using the editor on a regular basis. And this was one of them. For example, we always wanted kind of 2 columns with 2 sets of images, button underneath, and so on and so forth. And we thought, you know what, we can just create this as a block. So what I'm kind of doing there is extending this library. So this library gives me just the empty shell. What I'm doing is extending that layout library, but actually putting in some more placeholder type content. So again, it's just a time saver, especially if you've got people who are using Eloqua who are maybe not using it every day. Okay, if they're just, maybe it's once a month, their job is to create the newsletter, and every month they come in and create the newsletter. Well, something like this can really help save some time for those people. Greater personalization. So the concept here is that we can obviously use field merges and things like dynamic content, and they're fairly universal components, right? So we can use them in a range of different places, primarily email and landing pages when it comes to dynamic content. Field merges, though, of course, can be used to emails, landing pages, and also on forms to help pre-populate forms. We'll cover more about that next month. But the difference between the two, again, just so we're really clear, a field merge takes the content of a contact or a custom object field and displays it on your email. The most obvious example there is someone's name. So if you get an email to be like, "Dear Derek," if we use a field merge to present Derek, and that's coming from the contact. So the field that is merging is the first name field from the contact, and it's merging into the email landing page or the form. Versus dynamic content. So dynamic content will use the content of a contact or custom object field to control what is displayed. Easiest example I find here is to think about if you've got a whole bunch of contacts and you've got geographical information, including their state or province. For example, let's use West Coast, so of the US. So what have we got? We've got Washington, Oregon, California. And so what you might have is a newsletter that's going to people within those Western states. But what you want to do is personalize it maybe with some imagery that is more representative of those 3 states. So what you can use is some dynamic content, and your underlying rule would probably be country equals USA and state equals WA. Or country is USA and state equals OR for Oregon and California, etc. And so what we're doing there is using the data contained in the contact to drive what is actually presented to people. And so dynamic content is the one way you can do that. Now, you can extend the personalization in your emails to a few areas. You've got the subject line, you have preview text, and any combination of text or images that you may want to do. So the key to any successful personalization, of course, is your data. However, don't be of the opinion that, well, my data's not good enough. It'll, if you start with that approach, you'll probably never do any personalization. So clean data is an never-ending cycle, and it's something that we all have to do on an ongoing basis. You must always use defaults with any of these areas within Eloqua, so that can cover you where there's data that is absent, okay, that is missing completely. So let's have a look just at how you can apply some of that. And I thought one of the easiest ways was, in fact, to show you something that we've done here at Marketing Cube. So let's have a look. So this was the invitation for August. And the reason I chose this one is it's quite heavy from a dynamic content point of view. And you can see also a little bit of the field merges that have been used here as well. So the first one is the actual hero image at the top of the page. So this one is quite heavily personalized, I think, from memory. If I click on edit, I think this is the global banner. Yeah, it is. So it covers the Americas, EU, New Zealand, London or the UK, and in Australia, Western Australia, like so. And so here you can see the rules as they apply. I learned quickly that Washington in the United States is also WA, as is WA, Western Australia and Australia. So I realized I had to have both the country and the state in play there. Otherwise, I was going to have people in Washington State presented with 9 a.m. Perth start times. So it all comes down to your data. So that was one area of dynamic content, just using the banner image to do that. The next one here relates to, and you've probably seen this yourself, when it pops into your inbox, it has the date that you first subscribed to the user group. So the reason we have one that is blank, and I think this is important for you to be aware of as well, a default rule can in fact be blank. Okay, it doesn't have to have content in there. And the reason this one doesn't have content is because if we don't have a user group join date populated on your contact, then I don't want to present anything per se. Okay, so that's why that one is sitting in place. Okay, and so you can see it just sitting over here on the right hand side, and is a field merge from the contact. Then again, we used more dynamic content here because we were looking to communicate ever so slightly for slightly different audiences in relation to how we presented and pitched. It was a little bit of an industry separation for financial services, higher education, and then the rest of us, essentially. And then the other big piece of dynamic content here is this one, which is the geography of start times. And it's interesting, the rules to present this are identical to the rules that present this. So I'm not having to redo things. I'm just copying literally one piece of dynamic content, and then I'm just moving the content out and putting new content in. So I'm not having to adjust the rules as I go through that whole exercise. So that's just one example of where we've used dynamic content to help us produce a single email versus having to potentially produce multiple emails. And because it's heavily templated, it just makes sense, and it's much easier to do on a regular basis. So that's one, hopefully, good example for you to think about from a dynamic content, and also a little bit of personalization from a field merge point of view. Okay, so the ability to edit the current dynamic content is a little bit limited because of the editor, and the editor is still the old Eloqua editor. So those of you that have been using Eloqua for some time will find that one familiar. And I'm just trying to find a good example here. I apologize, won't be 1 second. And, gosh, I had this open today. I was looking at it. Is it this one? Yes. Ever so slightly, right. So this editor that you can see here is the old editor. And so what it gives you is a mobile friendly result, but not a responsive result. Oracle have made it pretty clear that this won't be changing in the current edition of Eloqua. However, we know, well, there's always that safe harbor statement that Oracle will tell you with everything. But we highly expect in the new platform that this whole editor will be refreshed and will be matching the same experience you have when you're building emails in the design editor. So there is a workaround in the interim that you can play with. And the workaround is essentially to use the email. Let me just quickly show you this slide to get this point across. Essentially, what you're going to do is use the email design editor simply as a content building tool. So don't think of it as you building an email. You're simply using the design editor to create a section of content that we're going to be able to paste into the dynamic content editor. And the output of that, the reason you're doing that is because it's going to be responsive and it will blend in and match perfectly with your email within the design editor. So you don't have to worry about headers and footers. As I said, it's not an email that we're creating. We're just creating some content, because what we want to do is grab the HTML, copy it, and paste it directly into the dynamic content editor. So let me show you how to do that. It's very simple, by the way. So actually, here's one I created earlier. We're working on this one today. So this is a campaign we're working on where people can select various different topics, and as a result of their choices, what we then present to them will differ, essentially. So you can see here, there is no header, there is no footer, there's kind of nothing there really except for just literally the content. So what I can do is go to my actions menu and select export HTML. All you need to do is click on copy to clipboard. You don't need to touch the HTML, just simply copy it to clipboard. Then from there, you can go to your dynamic content under the components area. And I'll just create a silly one here that will serve no purpose. I can go to full. So let me just go back there, make sure you got that. So we have the full menu here, which is like so. And then you can click on the source button. So the source button will then present you with that very familiar black HTML screen. So I'm just going to use my keyboard to paste what I just copied. If I click on rich, the first thing you'll notice is there's no images. Don't worry about it. As soon as you hit save and come back in, you'll see the images. They are there. For some reason, they don't render. But now what I've got is a piece of dynamic content that is responsive. You'll see it matches exactly. It's all centered. It's white, just as my original was, etc. So that's a time saver. I think since we've been doing this, since we figured this out as a workaround, our use of dynamic content has exploded exponentially, because this was a little bit of a barrier with the older editor. So if you're only doing things like subject lines, you don't need to worry about any of that. If it's just simply a subject line, like for instance, we have these are, anyway, if it's just simply a subject line, all you need to do is type it in like this. You don't need to worry about any styling or anything like that, because it's just simply a subject line. But once you've done that, then you can drop that into your email to personalize the email itself. So if I show you this one as an example, you'll notice when you look at the settings area, at the moment there's just a subject line sitting there, but when you click on insert, you've then got the ability to select dynamic content. Let's see if I can find something randomly. Probably not. But once you find something that fits and is appropriate, yeah, there we go. Just drop in that one so you can see what it looks like. So it then becomes this blue section. So I should remove the other stuff that's around it. And there it is. I've just deleted part of it. But yes, so you'll see that blue section essentially. And you can do exactly the same thing from a preview text point of view. So again, I find the key reasons I tend to use dynamic content is because I'm looking at the underlying data of the people who are in my segment. And when I look at the segment, I can then sort it in different views. And for instance, and we do this occasionally with different events that we're running, We work out kind of who we want to talk to. When I get that list together and I can look at it now with a full list of data, I may see that there's a disproportionate number of people from the financial services industry or from higher education, for example. It's at that point that I then probably turn around to our CEO, Adrian, and to the team and say, hey guys, look, we've got a big chunk of people here from FinServe and a big chunk from higher education. I'm thinking we could use some dynamic content to just tailor the pitch for the event. How do we communicate to someone in higher education versus how do we communicate with somebody in FinServe about this event and what they could potentially get out of it? So until you've got that chance to actually look at the data, that's usually when I personally would suggest that's when you want to make the decision about dynamic content. The only other time I think it becomes easy is when you've got a campaign in mind and you're really thinking about a target audience, and it's maybe a nurture campaign that maybe takes place over several months and might have 10 or so emails, more even. That's another perfect example for dynamic content, because it's highly likely that as somebody enters your campaign, as they move through that nurturing campaign, the objective usually is to obtain more information about the person. So as we obtain more information about the person, it's highly likely that by the time they get to email number 10, you're going to know a lot more about the person than you did at the beginning stages. And so you can use dynamic content in the course of that campaign to present different pieces of information and more personalized information instead of just consistently generic type of messages as they move through. So yeah, love dynamic content, certainly obviously used in conjunction with field merges, all those things can really help lift and enhance your communications. So whether it be an event, nurturing campaigns, whatever it may be, there's certainly great use for it. Okay, so the other thing to look at from an email point of view is obviously that whole previewing section. So we want to have a look at our email and understand how it works and so on and so forth. So there are a few ways to do it. And effective testing is always a really good idea. And you may have worked out already that when you preview an email or even a landing page within Eloqua, you must always do it in the context of a contact within the database. So you'll go to preview, and the first thing you'll see is Eloqua saying to you, okay, find me a contact, and then I'll preview your content for you. And so that's obviously how you go about that process. Now, the most effective test will always be when you send that test to yourself, okay? And whenever you do send it to yourself, I always find I'm constantly on mobile, generally have the iPad in front of me as well, and then obviously on the laptop, and I've got Gmail, Marketing Cube, all of our Marketing Cube accounts are Gmail, so I've got Gmail open. So I'm kind of going through that whole process. If we make fundamental changes to our email templates, we usually push those off through Litmus just to do a double check, make sure we're comfortable with them. Once I've done that though, I don't feel the need to do that with every single email that I create. As long as I'm working off my templates, they're fundamentally the same. Now, dynamic content, okay? Dynamic content and testing and viewing dynamic content is easy to do when you're using the preview function, but obviously sending yourself an email to the same email address isn't going to work from a dynamic content point of view unless you're going in and changing your contact to conform to all the different renditions that you may have in dynamic content, which can be a bit sloppy. So there is a smarter way to do it. If you have a Gmail account, and you probably don't want to use your personal Gmail account, that's just a bit crazy, just create a new Gmail account. I've used acme@gmail.com here as a silly example. But Gmail has this kind of cool function which enables you to create an account. Then under the example section that you can see here at the bottom of the screen, imagine we're now in Eloqua, because as you know, Eloqua, every email account is unique and you can't add duplicate emails to Eloqua. So imagine multiple contacts in Eloqua, each with a different email address. One is Acme plus prospect, plus customer, maybe it's student, whatever it might be. You might choose geography because that's where you use a lot of dynamic content. So you might have Acme plus Germany, Acme plus Poland, Acme plus wherever, etc. Whatever maybe geography is something that's important to you. Then what you do is in Eloqua, you create those contacts and you add all the information that would be typical that represents somebody in Germany. So maybe you have loads of customers in Germany, or maybe if they're a prospect, there are different things that you would have against them. Then what you're able to do is use those accounts to send a test email. But the nice thing is, whatever you send to Acme Plus Prospect at gmail.com, all of those test emails will come into the same inbox at acme at gmail.com. All right. So this does make the testing process a lot easier. It enables you to test it in a real life scenario where you've actually got an email arriving in the inbox versus doing it within Eloqua purely. So the preview function, we can access from the actions menu, and we can go to preview. So as I said, when we preview anything, we must always preview it in the context. Now, if I'll show you all of my fake Gmail accounts. Here they are. So these are all different profiles that I've created for different purposes. And you can see in here, if you look closely, you'll see Derek at USA, Derek at Canada, Derek in Singapore, Derek in Berlin, etc. And so if we look closely at those particular, let's take Berlin for fun. When I click on preview, so I get to see in the preview the subject line, obviously who it's to and from, the reply to, etc. I also see some dynamic content kicking in here. So for anybody that's told us they're in Germany, we actually greet them with a hello, H-A-L-L-O in German. We obviously don't translate everything into German, but we thought the greeting in German might be nice. So they see that. Now, because the profile tells me on the contact that person is in Berlin, they're in Germany, and their region is EU, then that's what's driving the dynamic content to show this information here at the bottom as well. And so it's one way for me to be able to look at that and know, yeah, okay, great. Anyone in Germany is going to see that particular version of the email. Now I can click on add contacts. And in this case, let's now jump to Derek in USA. Click on preview. So is your welcome campaign delivering results? Now we just say hello in English. Maybe I don't know how, well, some people say I should say g'day in Australia, but no, I would never send out an email with g'day. But down the bottom here, we'll see, yep, so we see slightly different times. So now we're seeing New York, Toronto, etc. And that's because the contact is configured to be in, I think mine's in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. So, and region being the Americas. And so that's another way that you can go through and do your testing there as well. Now, because those email addresses all go into my work email account, I can obviously then also send a test to actually get it into my inbox and have a look at it. And so I can click on all the relevant links, etc. And so you'll see, again, same thing in here. You can see I've done them a dozen times. So they're showing over again. So, Western Australia, for example, and the list goes on. And so that's how you send yourself a test within the platform as well. So that's hopefully a couple of little workarounds and maybe a couple of little cheats that you hopefully or maybe weren't aware of. Oh, I didn't assign a user. That needs to come from someone because there's a signature in there. So let's pick on Adrian and run that again. There we go. Yeah, so hopefully there's been a few little tricks in there, maybe things that you've not been aware of previously. We probably should jump to questions. We've nearly got time to wrap up, but let's have a look. Yeah, so again, just for those that maybe were just a little bit late joining us this morning, the release 20D which is the final release for this calendar year, is due mid-November. The Oracle team will be announcing the range of functions that are available with release 20D at the end of this week. So we've just missed it, unfortunately, or it hasn't happened, I should say. It hasn't happened. So we'll get that information from Oracle and we'll be able to get that to you by the November user group, which is in fact our final user group for the year. If you wanted to join us, we'll obviously send you an invitation to register. If you wanted to cheat and get ahead, you can scan that QR code that's on your screen right now and jump the queue if you like, or jump the line and join us for that. Yeah, one of the interesting things with all of those different types of people that you're working on, those different examples of dynamic content and playing around, etc. One thing that is very popular that we're seeing a lot of and where we play with ourselves is the application and use of personas in marketing. So that becomes a whole nother fun game to play with in relation to your data and the assignment of certain personas to certain contacts. Probably next year, have a chat with Adrian, our CEO. We probably should try and do something in next year in the user group to try and help you understand some ways that you can use personas in your marketing, specifically with your technology, to drive even more personalized types of communications out to the people you're talking to. But if you do, on that note, actually, if you do have ideas and topics that you'd like covered, would love to hear from you. You obviously have my email sitting in your inbox. Please just hit reply to any of those. I would be more than happy to start putting a list together for 2023 as this year begins to wrap up. But yeah, as I said, happy to stay on the line here if you've got any more questions. And but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you making the time. So thank you looking at the list. Thank you across Europe and the United States and Canada. Appreciate you joining us. But otherwise, we'll see you in November. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon and a good morning. Cheers. Bye-bye.